Thank you for coming. I hope to spend 30 minutes, maybe 20, 25 minutes together, and then we'll be around for any questions that might be generated from what we talk about today. But by way of introduction, my name is RJ Schultz. I'm with the Blip team. We are a local Utah company. I'll talk a little bit more about at the end when it's relevant to how we might infuse some psychological principles or the study of the way the human brain works into our marketing. Here's how the afternoon will look. I'll give you a quick intro about me. I would love to get into who you are, so some back and forth, some questions and answers to get a feel for what kind of personalities and expertises and experiences we have in the room so that we know where to best take the discussion. Then I'll sit behind the desk here and we'll go through some examples of human decision-making in the wild. Some very interesting stuff, at least from my perspective. And then we'll end with how to apply those types of psychological principles to our daily jobs as marketers. Because at the end of it all, we are employed to generate demand. We are employed to create demand amongst human beings. And I want to make sure we have at least one more way to do that beginning tomorrow. So quick intro about me. I want to just share one thing about me with you because it sets up a principle that will be relevant at the end of the conversation. Ever since I was a kid, I've been really driven by the outdoors. Like, I love the outdoors. And I'm not talking about the Utah sporty, like I love snowshoeing and I like snowboarding and I like the mountains. It's not that. I'm talking about like removing normal comforts from life, like a refrigerator or a bed or walls or a roof, so that my reality literally is the outdoors. I have no idea why. It's just the way I'm wired. We're all wired in some weird ways. And for me, this is just one of those things. I have no idea. But I mean, even when I was 8 or 10 years old in 4th and 5th grade, I used to ask my mom, we lived right by some woods in the panhandle of Florida, like, Mom, will you please just get off your duff and go to school with me, talk to my teachers, tell them I don't need to be here. Just get the homework if they think it's that important. Give me the packets. I want to go out into the woods and just live. I don't like this place. Get me to the woods. And so as I was thinking about that, I'm like, I'm going to call my mom. I'm going to ask my mom to tell me her recollection of that to make sure I'm not embellishing anything. And this is her quote. I don't know, RJ, that was crazy, like to say the least. When I realized how serious you actually were, she wanted to say, like, what's a mother supposed to think? Like, your son doesn't want to be indoors. Am I going to wake up and have you run off to some distant land in the jungle? But she's like, I was worried legitimately that you were insane. I mean, who are you? What kind of kid does that? And then she ended by saying, well, I guess I know now. And that carried with me after 10 years old. It like became a pattern in my life. It caused me to act, which is what we're talking about today, right? I spent 9 months living in a tent with no water or electricity in the eastern part of Syria. Most recently, actually 2 weeks ago, I took my 12-year-old son to the Amazon and we conducted like a little father-son survival training. I wanted desperately to get him out there and to start learning some of these principles and doing some things that are actually hard so that he can come back to civilization and have the confidence in himself, like, you know what, I can do this. I've done things like this before. Like, I can do hard things. And so here are a couple of pictures from that trip just 2 weeks ago. This is him. We're taking the train. That's us in the jungle. What we did was we flew to a place called Iquitos in Peru, only accessible by nodding your head. You been there? Maybe? Cool. Well, you know about it. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Okay. No, you're right there with me, man. It's only accessible by boat and plane. So we land. We then get on a boat, this little banana leaf boat here, which was taking on water. Never fear, dude had a bucket. So we're just running down the Amazon doing this. And we went 4 hours upriver to a little village. I have a friend, his name is Raul. He grew up there. He's since come to civilization. But he runs a tourism shop where people come to the Amazon, they see what life is like and learn about the ecosystem. And I was like, Raul, I do not want to do your stupid little eco tour thing, okay? I want to go live with your friends, like your family, where you grew up. Let me take my son there. And so he arranged that, 4 hours upriver, and we went and spent a couple weeks there. He dropped us off. picked us up a couple weeks later. But this middle picture, that was the journey into his hometown, so to speak, right? He gives us a couple guns, a couple of other things. He's like, watch out for jaguars, watch out for pumas. I'm like, okay, all right. So that was our adventure, right? This is a picture on the left of my son fishing. We caught piranhas almost every day and ate them. They are amazing. Did not know that. That was fun to learn. In the middle here, that's a little parakeet. On our first night, our first day, he kind of like walked up to our camp, our little hammock tent area, and then every day came back. And so my son, he had this little friendship with him, named him Gustavo, and this is the day we left. Like out of nowhere, that parakeet shows up, comes right up to his boot, crawls up his pants and his shirt, and then perched on his finger, and I took that picture. My wife was like, that's the best picture ever. I'm so glad you got that. And then this is a survival shelter that we constructed one morning to shelter us from the rain. So it was a lot of fun. But my point here is, for some reason, I've always been just outdoors. Survival has made me tick, and it has led me to some weird action. Everyone we tell about this is like, you're an idiot. Why did you do that? To be fair, on our way out of the jungle, I did spend 2 days in the hospital with a parasite, but my son did not, so that's a win, right? I was careful enough to shelter him, to shield him, but not enough for myself. And so that is something that we will come back to. And now I want to take a minute. Is Aspen in the room? Can you come up here and give me some assistance 1 second? Just apply your fingerprint to this touch to open this. Yes, sir.
What's your scariest moment, like in all your travels? I'm just curious.
Scariest moment in all my travels or the Amazon trip?
Yeah, maybe the most scary that you think you have encountered.
During that 9 months in Syria, there was a unit in Iran that said, we know where you are, and none of you are making it out of there alive. And so we took precautions, and we were monitoring that situation very heavily. And we had this, like all of the, call it department leaders of the different units that were living in this camp, we would have these meetings to say, like, if X happens or if Y happens, this is how we're going to respond. And so we had everyone assigned to different vehicles. We had rally points, and like, we're going to meet here in case that ballistic missile's on its way. We had 24 minutes from the time it was launched to the time it would touch down. And by the time we heard about it, like, you're already eating into that 24 minutes, right? So we're planning on 14 minutes, and we had this going. So the code word was Alamo, if I remember correctly. And some hard-charging dude from the 82nd Airborne had come to stay with us, and they brought a team of just infantry guys, right? And he was like, I'm gonna practice with my team, so we're extra prepared. It's like outside the normal practices for this fleeing drill, right? So I'm on my little makeshift Syrian motorcycle coming down the hill, and I can see his camp, and everyone in his unit runs out of their tents, and they say, Alamo, Alamo! And I see him running, and I just stop. I'm like, this is it. I did not call that drill. It's over. So I ran and did what I was supposed to do according to that drill, and when we got to the rally point, I'm like, where's that guy? He was the first one that was getting ready, and he didn't come because it was fake. He was just doing his own drill, and he alarmed everyone else. And so that was really scary because I thought that might have been the end. But yeah, good question. Any other questions? Okay, so I want to get to know a little bit about you guys. So let's get a feel for who's here. Anyone from outside the US? Yeah, where are you from?
Canada.
Canada. That doesn't count, Mark. Yes. Mexico. Which state? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, who's from Utah in here? There you go. I love Utah. No matter how many times we leave or for how long, like, we will always stay connected to this ecosystem because there is something very, very special going on here. And I hope you don't take that for granted. Like, there literally is no organization like this outside of Silicon Valley in other places. And there is special activity on the professional front going on here in Utah, and I really love it. How many students do we have? Anyone is a student, current student? Okay, what are you guys studying? Marketing? Marketing? Business. Anybody study psychology? Any psychology majors from school? Okay, couple. All right. Anyone in their career 1 to 5 years? 1 to 5 years into a career, 1 to 5 years out of school, past 5 years? Past 10 years? Past 15? Hey, past 20? Okay, I won't make you keep going, but glad you're here, man. Any CrossFitters? Anyone does CrossFit? Well, you know that no one's here, because if they were here, they would tell you. They would have said it before, right? Any vegans? Any vegans? Any physiology experts, nutrition experts, otherwise known as vegans to the rest of us? No vegans? Any millionaires? Anyone with a personal net worth north of $1 million? And I'm not talking about your equity in your house, okay? Because Utah's got something weird going on. I'm talking like, who's got a net worth of cash or investments come from something you did that's more than $1 million? Okay? Not yet. All right. Aspen, can I get your finger one more time? Oh, never mind, I got it in time. Anyone currently or recently left your religion? Anybody wake up one day and just like, I know better. I'm good. Okay. Anybody in an open marriage? Anybody like sharing that part of their life? The buffet approach to intimacy? Anybody? No? Just looking for friends, guys. Any diehard Biden supporters? Any super Trump fans? I gotta tag each idiot camp equally there. Anyone wanna lay claim to any of that? Anyone with an STD? Has anyone knowingly passed an STD to a partner? This is important. I'm serious. Like, you're not giving me much, and I want to know something about you, right? Like, anybody a registered sex offender? You have to say if you are. You have to say if you are. And I'm serious. I put pictures of my 12-year-old up there. You better tell me if you are. Anybody been to jail for anything else? Yeah, for what?
I was a missionary in Russia.
Saratov approach?
No.
Okay.
Hopefully not that.
Okay, well, that's such a wholesome story. I wish you didn't answer, man. Anybody been to jail for something real? Yes.
Bank robbery.
Really? Were you an active participant? Were you the getaway driver?
I was the active perpetrator.
All right. Where's the cash?
A long time ago.
Long time ago.
This investment was not worth the exchange.
Okay. Hey, man, I appreciate that, and I respect that. That's really cool. What kind of a story could you make up even better than that for turnaround, right? I like that. Anyone ever?
I just respect Matt, he's like been so open and cool about it.
That is cool.
It's funny. It's my life's biggest mistake, and yet everybody says it's cool.
I mean, the rehab is cool. That's
It's a cool story.
Yeah.
But it is the biggest mistake I've made.
the rehab is cool, man. I really think the rehab is cool. I guess I need to keep going. There's too much laughing. I need someone to feel offended. Anyone struggling with gender identity? Anyone look at their wife or their husband and wish like, damn it, I wish I'd married your brother or your sister. I picked the wrong one. By the way, if any of you go into government work and you have a full scope polygraph test taken to determine your fit for keeping secrets, oh man, this is only the beginning. Okay. Well, thank you for participating in some of those questions. I think I know you well enough to move on, right? I want you to take note, though, of what you were thinking and feeling as you heard those inappropriate questions. Those are inappropriate, every single one of them. It was painful for me to ask, like really painful. In fact, I have an emoji to show you how painful it was. It was rough, but you took it well. And I want you to consider what you were thinking about me in particular when you heard those words coming out of my mouth, right? Like, who is this guy? What does he think he is? And how is this relevant to anything we're doing, right? The point of today, though, is that as marketers, you control what your audience thinks and feels. And I'm sure that on some scale, as we heard those inappropriate questions, especially at the beginning when they were kind of demeaning and derogatory toward vegans and CrossFitters and all those idiots, just kidding. You may have felt something like disgust or disbelief or surprise or wonderment. How far is this going to go? Why is it relevant? Interest, stuff like that. But at the end of this all, remember, it is your job to elicit feelings from your audience on purpose. You can do that in a negative or a positive way, on purpose or not on purpose, but it's going to happen, right? Long before Blip, I spent some time at the Department of Defense and in the Army, both in the Army, but also in various like contract and federal agencies as a human intelligence collector and an interrogator. And in those jobs, we focus on human behavior. We focus on why people do the things that they do. Because the practical application is to get somebody to act in a certain way, to get someone to act in the way you want them to act, or to get them to act in a predictable way so that you can plan for it, okay? And that's the whole point of that line of work. If you are to, I'd say the business translation is a good way to put it. The business translation for human behavior is demand, okay? And that's what I want to focus on today is like, how can we understand or use an understanding of human behavior to make us more effective marketers, more effective at creating demand? And so I'm going to take a seat here so that we can all focus on the screen behind, and let's go through some examples. If psychology is the study of the human mind and human behavior, or why people do the things that they do, and if marketing is creating demand in humans or amongst humans, right? Like the question becomes, is there something about psychology or the way humans think and function that we could be doing tomorrow to make ourselves better at creating demand? And before we answer that question in the context of business, I want to first look at a few examples of human behaviors out in the wild. A few examples of like, why do people do the things that they do? In the study of psychology, there's something called ego psychology. I said I was going to sit down, then I stood up, right? It proposes that ego operates in its own sphere, this conflict-free space where it has its own energy to pursue things that usually are independent of everything else that you're doing. So said another way, when ego is challenged or when it's front and center, like new rules, new reality, new objectives, even if they are completely at odds with what you're trying to accomplish, right? And we've probably experienced this in our lives, whether us being the perpetrators, no offense, perp, or the people that we are married to or interacting with, right? Anybody know what's special about these boots? These are Saddam Hussein's combat boots. He was wearing them when he was captured in a little hole in 2003. Anybody have an idea about what might be special about these boots or why they relate to us in this room in particular? What's special is they're currently sitting like 200 yards away from here. They're on the University of Utah campus, displayed in the Fort Douglas Museum, because it was a couple of dudes from Utah whose intelligence activities led to the capture of Saddam Hussein, which is kind of cool, right? Saddam was that didn't come through. These are 3 excellent pictures of Saddam Hussein to tell you that he is dead and everything's white where he lives, so let's pay homage there. But he was the Iraqi dictator from 1979 to 2003. It was his attempt to make Iraq a regional superpower that led to the Gulf War in 1991. He was subsequently captured in the Iraq War in 2003. This would have been a picture of how they found him in the hole. But then he was detained and executed in 2006 for war crimes. He was tried by his own people, executed in his own country, which is Pretty interesting for a martyr who thought he was doing everything right for his country. But the interesting thing here is that after he was detained, he did not talk. He was detained for 3 years, did not talk. They had interrogator after interrogator after interrogator go in there, and they're throwing the book at him. Everything you can imagine. They were trying things, everything you can imagine, he wouldn't break. Why do you think he wouldn't break? It's because ego drove everything he did. And in his mind, he's like, you're beneath me. I don't need to talk to you about anything. I have cemented my fate. I'll be a martyr for what I've done. I'll be revered. Children will be raised to be like me. And I don't need you as part of that equation. So he was silent. Silent, silent, silent. And then this little private got assigned to the base where he was held. And they were like, you want to take some reps for interrogation? You're brand new. Why don't you go take a shot at Saddam Hussein? You know what this little kid did? He got him to crack in like a week by using his ego. This kid went into the booth with Saddam Hussein, and Saddam had been interrogated by Army, DIA, CIA, everyone you can imagine, without saying a word. And the first thing that this kid did was just go in and fumble his fingers, and he shaked his voice, and he's just like, I don't think I should be here, but can you just tell me? You're a bad man. Everyone knows that. You're terrible. You're going to die. You're going to be hanged, and people are going to forget about who you are. But seriously, like, I'm interested in this picture right here. After killing so many of your own people, how does it feel to stand in front of a crowd that large, and even larger at times, pound your fist on the pulpit and have everyone just be like, yes! Just like roar in support for you. What is that like? That has got to course through your veins like drugs you've never seen before to have people so invested in who you are. And Saddam Hussein moved his crappy ass mustache and he was like, well, you know, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. A lot of people knew who I was. A lot of people liked what I was doing. And this kid and Saddam Hussein started to talk about what it was like to move the masses with your words. Got right under there into Saddam's ego and cracked him, which is really, really, really interesting to me, because after that speech about being the martyr and having this singular objective that you hold for a couple of years without saying anything to the contrary, somebody comes in and just pushes your ego button, and all of a sudden, you've got that extra store of energy pursuing different courses of action from what you set out to accomplish in the first place. It's automatic. Like, it's automatic. So interesting to me, right? Another example is of a principle of psychology that we can use in marketing, but is really fascinating in the real world, is the principle of identity. Who we are determines how we act, right? Anybody been to the Disney parks? Okay. This is a typical scene, right? You go to take your kids to see the princesses. This is 3 of them, Snow White, Cinderella, and Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Question for you. If you've ever been to Disney, how do you expect Snow White in particular to be behaving? Throw out some words that would describe her behavior. Childlike. Childlike, that's a really good one. She's just really innocent, just kind of like prancing around like there's nothing wrong with the world. She's like talking to squirrels and eating apples and whatever else she does. Right? That's exactly how you would expect Snow White to act. And that's how she does act when you go to the park. Like, she fulfills your wildest dreams, and even if you're 35 or 40, you come home like, oh my gosh, it was so amazing, you did exactly what I thought. Like, I'm not a Disney fan, by the way. I think they've got us all by the pockets. We'll get into that later. But what you don't see ever at the park, and please, I mean, I've said this probably 100 times to different audiences. If anyone has seen this, raise your hand, prove me wrong. You've never seen Snow White on a 15-minute break during her shift, sitting on a park bench, shooting out a text, lighting up a cigarette, anything like that. That's not what Snow White does ever at the park. Any ideas why? Spoiler alert, it's because of the principle of identity in psychology. Identity is woven into the way that they operate that entire job experience. So I'm going to go back to this. So for example, you're not coming in for a job interview, you're coming in for an audition. You're not an employee, you're an actor. You're not in uniform, you're in costume. And you're not at work, you're not on shift, you're on stage. So they weave the concept of who you are and what that should mean for how you act into every facet of their employee experience. And whoever gets that job is like, Mom, I'm Snow White. Mom, I'm Snow White. All the squirrels and apples I can handle, right? That's just how they act. And that's a choice by Disney because it drives certain behavior from its employees. And that is instead of writing an employee handbook that says like, no cigarette breaks on the bench, no text in the sight of customers. They don't have to do that because they've chosen the identity route. The identity, the psychology of identity is extremely, extremely fascinating. Here's one that I really love. Okay, take a second to read this and then I'll read it out loud. But I want this to settle in. What time do we end? 2:15? Yep. Okay. Okay. So here it is. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. You didn't think I was going to bring mothers-in-law into this, but here we go, right? This is for them. But this is super true. What it comes down to is the idea of cognitive dissonance, right? Where a discomfort exists when you are holding two contrary beliefs. You've got two behaviors that you want to pursue at the same time, but they are in contrast. It also touches a little on what's called a confirmation bias, where we give more weight to the things that we just really want to be true. We favor the things that make us feel good. And that stuff happens, right? A couple of examples of that. Anyone seen this show before? I think it's off the air. Oh man, another one didn't load. But it's called Lie to Me. Anyone heard of Lie to Me before? Yeah, remember that show? There's like a consultant with the LAPD, and he would come in and he would read facial expressions. Thank you very much. He'd read facial expressions of people who were being interrogated or whatever. And he would say like, oh, because their eyebrows this, and because their nose flares, and this is a sign of this, and this is a sign of that. Well, the premise behind that show is scientific, right? It is that our face is made up of a bunch of different micro muscles, a bunch of little tiny muscles, and they make micro expressions based on their placement. And that placement sends a message to your brain that says like, hey, this is the situation you're in, and this is how you have to act. And so that's what that was all about, right? Micro expressions tell your brain what to feel, how to act, and things like that. I had a professor whose study showed how important that was, right? And that without that connection, you were actually a worse lover. You were a worse person. You were a worse friend. You were a worse parent. And his research was deployed by a company in campaigns against, Botox. Someone said, how can you offend the most people in Utah in one slide? And I put Botox up, right? His research proved unequivocally that because the way humans interact, so if your best friend lost their job or they lost something and they were sad, they'd come to you and they'd be crying. You could see it on their face. The way your brain works is your eyes take that in. It's like, oh my gosh, they are crying. There is water draining from their eyes. And your brain takes that in and tells your facial expression or your face muscles, make this expression to mimic that. And so at the micro level, you don't know what's happening. Your muscles are tightening in such a way that mimic what you're seeing just enough to send something to your brain that says like, hey, we're in empathy mode here. She needs you, he needs you. Well, my professor said, if you freeze those muscles, you don't get that communication. And so you lose your ability to be empathetic, at least to your fullest extent. They proved it, scientifically proved it, and it was everywhere, right? In the Botox world, as big as that may be. But what's interesting is nobody cared. When those results came out, people still got Botox all the time. Why? Because they just wanted the opposite to be true, and that's all that matters to them, right? I'm just amazed at the mental gymnastics we go through to just make what we want true. And that absolutely happened, right? Anybody know or anybody heard of the Newhall incident in California? 4 California Highway Patrol officers, this is April 6, 1970. They were killed by 2 ex-cons. This guy's name is Jack Twining. If you ever go to Alcatraz and take a midnight tour, lots of stuff on this guy. He was a character, psychology study in and of himself. But he was out and he got stopped in a routine traffic stop because the car looked like another car that was involved in an earlier incident. So they stopped him. He ended up killing 4 cops, or he had an accomplice, but they were outgunned. And, oh man, this didn't load either. This was a picture of how the cars were positioned where you can see like, man, that guy should have died. But for some reason, he beat the 4 cops. He killed them all. This picture didn't load either. That was the actual crime scene. Maybe it's better that it was all white, right? But something really interesting came out of the post-gunfight investigation that changed highway patrol policy for a long time. What happened was they found the 4 dead cops with spent casings. So when the bullet fires, the casing drops to the ground. The spent casings in their breast pockets. When you're getting shot at, why are you taking the time to police up your brass, to clean up your brass? They did some investigating and found that when the police went to the range to practice with their weapons, they didn't want to stay late and clean the place up, so every time they shot 6, they'd just bend down and pick up the brass, talk to their friend, yeah, I hit 5 out of 6, man, that was amazing. And they'd stuff the brass in their pocket. They formed those habits. This is a psychology of repetition, right? They formed those habits so that when they were in the heat of the moment, they just devolved back to what they'd practiced. Many people think that heroes rise to the occasion, like, oh man, sometimes that does happen, right? But by and large, you do not rise to the occasion. When you confront a high-stress environment, your brain goes on autopilot and you sink to your level of training. And that's what happened to these officers, right? Interesting thing about that is that except after this was put out, the crime scene photos, well, let's see if this one loaded. Did not load. Dang it. The crime scene photos showed that all the spent shells were on the ground. So the crime scene photo proved that what I just told you was fabricated. It was a lie. Yet it has still been perpetrated for like 50 years to talk about how important it is to train as you fight. But you just throw up the photo and be like, it didn't happen. The casings are right there. Why do people still peddle it? Why do people still tell that story, even though it's irrefutably false? It's because they've crafted that story in their mind, and this is the cognitive dissonance and the confirmation bias. It's like, dang, this is so easy and convenient for me. I just don't want it to not be true, so I'm going to push ahead, right? People do that all the dang time. Anybody heard of the rule of 7? It's not really scientific. Came out in the 30s, but it's like people need to see your stuff 7 times before they choose to buy you, right? You can't just expect to put one advertisement up there and have people purchase after the first time. Anyone ever heard of that? It relates to trust, right? The psychological principle of trust. And what the study of psychology says about trust is that trust starts with credibility and it moves through a path into self-orientation. So when something is presented credibly, enough times after some repetition and familiarity, we start to build trust because we start to see ourselves in that product or in that message. And this is the essence of marketing, right? This is the essence of creating demand or interrogation, the essence of getting people to act in a way that you need them to act. And so the big question is like, psychology is just so fascinating, but like, how can we use it in marketing? What can we do tomorrow to generate more demand? And so I want to run through a quick practical application of that last example, the principle of trust in psychology, using McDonald's. Okay, so McDonald's launched a new menu item in 5 cities. These are DMAs like Oklahoma City, Dallas, St. Louis, cities like that. Launched a new menu item, and in all 5 cities, they put a 6-week Facebook advertising campaign ahead of it. In 4 of the 5 cities, they layered billboards on top of the Facebook campaign. And those 4 cities outperformed in sales per unit of the unit, outperformed the control city by 729%. 729% more sales in the cities that had billboards plus Facebook. Why? Why? It comes down to the psychology of survival, which is why we started in the Amazon. The psychology of survival says, in this context, when you're sitting on the toilet with your phone and an ad is put in front of you, you're not in the mood. You swipe it away as fast as possible, right? When an ad comes on the side of a news article you're reading or when you're texting or whatever you're doing on your phone, not in shop mode. But when you're driving on the highway and you're confronted by a billboard for 8 seconds, like that's forever. You know what I mean? And you're not even paying attention, but subconsciously you're forced to psychologically ingest, because of the psychology of survival, colors, logos, maybe a couple words, so the next time that thing surfaces on your phone, even if you're on the toilet, otherwise engaged, the psychology of survival says like, hey RJ, we've seen this before. Do we need to dwell an extra second to see if it's a benefit or a threat? And the answer is automatically yes. This is how blip works right here. We have 7 minutes left, so I'm going to give you a quick example, and I don't do this only to pitch to you, but I also want you to understand who we are, because I'm going to present to you an offer that you can redeem, in our inbox at any time, right? This is exactly how blip works. If you're an SMB, we're the top part of that McDonald's scenario. We're the out-of-home. We're the out-of-home awareness. And so the question is like, how do you apply this concept of the psychology of survival? And it is that you need to use different tools at various and varying stages of the consumer buying cycle, because it's what they need, right? I like to use the example of Facebook because it's the most common. Facebook, you'll find between a $14 and $18 CPM, but remember the challenge is we've got to get someone to fall in love with us. We've got to get them to know something and to feel something about us. They got to see us like 7 times. I don't think I have $18 a CPM to spend on getting people to see me that many times. And so the question is, how can we become more effective understanding the psychology of survival? Well, we can become more effective by removing Facebook from where it shouldn't be, or Meta, and applying tools appropriate to the consumer's mindset at a particular point in the buyer's journey. So for example, with McDonald's again, they said, all right, we're just launching this first time. Let's get the word out there. We're going to do something at a $4 CPM. Billboards, something a little cheaper, but credible. Remember, trust starts with credibility and then moves through familiarity into self-orientation. We're going to hit them with billboards at the top of that funnel. We're going to broadcast, make them aware. Go from unaware to aware with our most credible, authoritative, cost-effective form of advertising. Then as we move through the middle of the funnel, we're going to keep that going and start to weave in other things we're doing. Social media, some paid ads, influencer type stuff, leveraged audience marketing, LinkedIn thoughts, those what do you call them, fortune cookie things everyone wakes up in Utah and puts on LinkedIn. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? So we do that, and then once they've seen us 4 or 5 or 6 times, now that's very appropriate time to bring in the meta ads that are driving them to act. The CTA that we're fine paying $16, $18 a CPM for, because we know those impressions are qualified and that they'll work. And that is, in essence, how we as marketers can use what we know about how the brain acts and how the brain is wired to become more effective in creating demand. We've got to take a step back, or sometimes even 2, away from our KPIs, away from the expectations of leaders who don't understand this, and think as the consumer. I'm paying $18 a CPM to put an ad, a Facebook ad, on their phone every time they turn it on. Are they ready for that ad? They're not. They're not, unless they've seen you 5 or 6 times, right? So to become more effective of a marketer, we've got to set them up to act when they see that Facebook ad. Any questions on that before we end with one brief offer here? If you're an SMB, Blip is your ability to do that, to put an appropriate tool at the top of your funnel in the awareness portion of the buyer journey. If you're a franchise or an enterprise company with a little bit larger budget, then Blip is a full service solution for you. You can go to multiple ad agencies or billboard companies and buy 1 million impressions on a billboard for $4 CPM, right? What Blip is here to do is 2 things beyond that. We'll give you the same 1 million impressions, but secondly, we'll tell you what's going on in those 1 million impressions. So for example, you buy 1 million impressions in Salt Lake. We'll be able to say through some analysis and AI, buzzword, That million impressions was actually 272,000 people between Draper and Salt Lake. Out of the 272,000 people, 10 people saw it one time. 27 people saw it 2 times. 38 people saw it 3 times. 97 people saw it 4 times, and so on. So we'll be able to tell you what's going on inside that bulk of impressions that you bought. And the third thing that we can do is then help you retarget that critical mass of folks who has seen your ad 4 and 5 times by setting up a geofence either around the boards that they've been seeing or around your store if it's a physical location or anywhere you want. And anytime their phone in the car drives through that geofence, will fire off your ad to their phone so that for the 6th and the 7th time, they're receiving that Facebook call to action. Hey, this is someone you know and you love and you trust and who has made you laugh and who has saved your life with that LinkedIn advice. Now it's time to buy their product or service. So that is how we at Blip deploy the principles of psychology and marketing. I'm happy to report a couple of our favorite metrics over the last couple of years are 3.5 times increase in our monthly revenue run rate without hiring anyone else. And I'm talking like on the order of double-digit millions. Another favorite metric is that when we decided to come out of stealth mode, there were 3 companies that controlled our industry. 3 companies that controlled our industry. They controlled $6 billion worth of out-of-home spend. We kicked in the door, and instead of getting squashed, one CEO stood up and another CFO stood up. This is of the big 3 and a couple of agencies that powered them, and they're like, this is the future. They quit and they joined the team. So they're with us, and we're building a team around them because they're the ones that actually know what this industry needs. It's super, super helpful. So that's how we deploy the concept of psychology and marketing in just one example, one 45-minute example, and it's going really well. We want so badly to be part of the Utah ecosystem and empowering you guys to realize the same type of growth. So if this type of marketing is in your future, please connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know you want to do it. We have an offer for everyone here that will give you 25% of whatever you spend in additional advertising volume. So if you spend 100 grand, you get $25,000. Spend 10, 2,500. Spend 1,000, 250. And so that's something exclusive for you guys here. You can find us at Blip on LinkedIn. I'm the only RJ at Blip out there. But with that offer, our presentation is concluded, and we're right on time. Does anyone have any questions before we part?
What's your position at Blip?
My position at Blip, I serve as the COO. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So organic is 90% marketing, 10% reality.
What do you mean by that?
Organic food that my wife likes to buy.
Oh, organic food. I gotcha. Yeah. I mean, you're really playing into, I had in my notes, I'm like, with the cognitive dissonance and the confirmation bias, who are the 2 biggest perpetrators of taking advantage of that principle? It's politics and it's food and beverage, right? It's that. You're absolutely right. Go buy $10 bananas. Yes, sir.
Who's doing the best billboards in Utah right now?
In Utah? Oh man, who'd you guys say? I think, here's why I think, okay, they're in Utah. Chick-fil-A. Why? Because you all know the answer to this question. What 3 words are on every Chick-fil-A billboard? Everyone wants to put up a billboard and take 3 weeks to design it and have your card, your social security number on there and pictures of you and your kid and the Amazon. It's so ineffective because people are not going to convert from a billboard. Remember, billboards are used in the awareness portion of your marketing funnel. Eat More Chicken is the best example of that. Great question. Feel free to get up and walk out, but I'm still here if anyone has any other questions.
Let's give a round of applause.